There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. We have got a great show for you today, but before we get rolling, I got to tell you, I'm a little messed in the head right now. I just got finished reading this new book from Aftershock Comics called My Date with a Monster, and I got to tell you, that thing is just, wow. That's a weird book.
You're welcome.
Yes. But you want to hear more about My Date with a Monster and a bunch of other titles that we're going to be talking about with the guy that just popped on screen, Kyle. Come back at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern for in-stores this week as we break down some of the comics that will be coming into shops this week, along with the one down there in the bottom corner, Carriers #1, which we're going to get to in just a minute. But before we get to that, I just want to tip my hat and say rest in peace to Dean Stockwell, who passed away. Most of us know him from his incredible time on Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula. He's been just a great actor for many years, and it's saddened to hear of his passing. So, Godspeed, Mr. Stockwell. We've got some great shows coming up this next 2 weeks. This is rare. We've actually got the next 2 weeks planned out for the show. Today, we're going to be talking about Carriers #1. Tomorrow, I am going to do a spoiler breakdown of the Eternals. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about Dune. So this is pretty much your big sci-fi epic week. Then next week, we'll start off on the 16th, talking about all the news that comes out of the Disney Plus Day. That's going to be happening this Friday. So you're going to want to, if you don't get a chance to watch Disney Plus Day, I'll have all the highlights for you on the 16th. On the 17th, by Kyle's request, we're going to do a deep dive into the Ghostbusters, as the new Ghostbusters Afterlife will be premiering that weekend. And then on Thursday, we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, an incredible writer and director, Adam Marcus. You probably know him from books like Jason, or from the movie Jason Goes to Hell. And also he's got this great holiday-based horror movie called Secret Santa, which is mainly what we're going to talk about. And you guys need to see this movie to believe it. It is phenomenal. So that's the lineup for the next 2 weeks as we get approaching the holidays. And then let's go ahead and get to our main topic today. We are going to be talking to, from the new Red 5 series, Carriers, we have Jason Hewer and Ben Ferrari. Ferrari. I want to say Ferreira.
Yep, just like the car.
Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Guys doing? Good. Well. All right. I had a chance to read this book, and I have to start with is going to be the question I think a lot of people are going to ask, which is, why pigeons?
Why pigeons? Carrier pigeons are one of those things that everybody thinks is cool. They take messages, and they're sort of secretive, and they're highly trained and intelligent. And so it just seemed like low-hanging fruit. It seemed like an idea for a comic book that nobody had done, and I had to do it. You go for the stuff that everybody thinks is cool, but it hasn't been done before. It made sense.
So funny. I'm going to add on to that one because the stories take place in New York City. Yes. And I think pigeons are associated with New York City to the point where in my first meeting about Carriers, I couldn't even tell you how many years ago it was at this point. I'm sitting there with Erica Heflin discussing stories, and there's a pigeon sitting in the Javits Center right next to us. I mean, that's how like entwined it is with New York City. New York City pigeons, as Ben said, it's never been done before.
All right. So, Ben, this is your creation, and Jason came on. So, what is your? Let's start with what is your pitch for the book?
The carriers are weaponized carrier pigeons and their New York adventures. Is it all in their mind, or are they actually having these huge adventures every single month? So we tell great big stories, and we can do whatever we want, because at the very end of each story, there's going to be a hint that maybe what you just saw was all in their heads. And so it gives it a unique twist, a unique spin. And it also makes it so we can do literally anything we want. You know, we have smaller, quieter stories about a storm, you know, hitting New York City. We also then have aliens attacking New York City, and the birds have to go up against them. And then at the end of the story, there's a hint that maybe it's just in their heads, that these birds have big imaginations. So I created the idea and a couple characters a couple years back, and I got a hold of Erica Heflin, who Jay mentioned a minute ago, and she took it and made it what it is today. So I created it, but her and I made it what it is. And then Jay has come on, and a couple other creators, and added significantly to it. So there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen.
All right. Now, Jay, you're coming on board. What was your first thought when you heard about the book?
So when I was sitting with or talking to Ben, he sent me some information, and my mind, as I'm reading through these characters, my mind went to the dynamic that the Ninja Turtles have. So I'm looking at 4 weaponized carrier pigeons playing off of each other in a very similar way that the Ninja Turtles would play off of each other. Or, you know, you might go back to the Fantastic Four back in the early 60s when, you know, Stan Lee brings them to life and they're arguing and fighting with each other. Each one has their own distinct personality. So I took that and I'm like, I can identify with these characters. And for me, that's what a story is. A story is all about character. And then, as Ben had said, that whole dynamic of, is it real or is it in their head? I'm like, oh my goodness, this is Muppet Babies. And you know, growing up, I'm a child of the 80s, so Muppet Babies was constantly on my television. So I'm watching this, and it's like that idea that these characters can go on any adventure, anywhere, at any time, what was huge. And it all happened in the confines of a daycare playroom. So I took that and I'm like, that's awesome. It allowed me to start that circular storytelling, you know, bookends. You open with this little image of somebody telling a story, and in the background there's a television, and that television has something that, if you pay attention, you're very familiar with. If you don't pay attention, you know, like me, I'm guilty of this. I'll read through a comic and then I'll go back a second time, like, oh my goodness, it was right there on page 1. And on that screen, you'll see something, and then they go on this adventure. Something pulls them into this story, and then I like bookending stories. So the last page would end up, you know, showing something similar to the first page. Ironically, I fished out my first carrier story as I was sitting here. This is War Correspondence 2. And in this book, I worked with Kurt Belcher. Thank you, Ben, for setting us up. And you can see the first page of my story shows everybody in wings. Like that panels, that's Kurt Belcher's phenomenal artwork and setting that up. And then the last page of this story, it ends with the wings going the other direction. So it's just like everything happens between wing flaps of these pigeons. So that's really how I took the spin on it. I have to, for me to write any kind of story, I have to identify with the characters first and then build the character dynamic throughout their adventure. To me, the adventure is second nature. You know, it's all explosions and action, if you will.
Now, what is the history of this series? Because, you know, I'm picking it up brand new. I'm seeing Carriers #1. I'm thinking this is where it begins. But talking to you guys, you've got other published books, you've got other published stories. So what is the history of this series, of this franchise?
Well, like I said, it's been a few years. I created the idea. I've been publishing as Pilot Studios for probably 8 years or so. And so I started, like I mentioned, with Erica Heflin developing the series. We started on what was issue. It's sort of a one-shot. I was making all these books as one-shots. And we just kept going. And Jay came on not long into it. And I think we probably have 6 or 7 full-length Carriers comic books done, plus a couple of pinup books. That's what Jay mentioned as far as the War Correspondence. Those were mainly pinup books because I had a lot of people interested and just wanted to do their version of the book. So I ended up with stacks and stacks of pinups. And, like I said, low-hanging fruit. What do you do with pinups? You make a pinup. So we made a couple of war correspondence books, and in each one we put a short story. And that's what Jay's mentioning. So we did the 2 war correspondence and 7 or 8 full-length books. And my idea in the beginning when I created it was to do sort of a Tintin style, right? Where you didn't have Carriers #1, you didn't have Carriers #2. You had Carriers, Storm of the Century, Carriers, War of the Flyar. So we did multiple books like that. And in the end, when we ended up with Red 5, who loved the concept when they saw it, I decided to retool them and put them out as Carriers 1 through 5, season 1, right? So we're starting with season 1, Carriers 1 through 5. So I have a couple of books left over for a season 2. We're working on more adventures to add to season 2 as well. But yeah, that's how it started, and that's where we are today. The books are similar to where they were a couple years ago when we finished, but they're new and they're remastered in lots of ways too. So,
okay. So for the people who have, so this is bringing the other books forward. So it's like, if I go out and I get Carriers #1, I don't need to go and track down previous stuff. You're bringing this all to Red 5 now.
Correct. So the first Carriers #1 that we're putting out with Red 5 right now, we drop you in the middle of an adventure, no question about it. But you don't need to read anything previous. You figure it out as you go. We introduce you to some main villains, who we call the Croc King. He's basically rules the underworld of New York City, lives in the sewers. And there's a big group of rats called the Rat Pack that are sort of connected to him. There's a couple of falcons called the Falcon Brothers, mafioso-style falcons. Mm-hmm. And so you just figure it out as you go. So yeah, the answer is you don't need to have read anything before. In fact, all of these books are standalone adventures. And like I said when we started, I wanted to do standalone adventures like Tintin. And so you can pick up issue 3, never having read issue 1 or 2. And figure it out. It's not hard. These are standalone adventures. What happened in issue 2 and 1 and 2, you don't have to know about in order to read issue 3 and so on. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Jason, you'd made the turtle comparison, and when we talked just before the show started, I had referenced G.I. Joe, and the reason I was thinking G.I. Joe is because you've got the grizzled veteran leader, you've got the communication or computer guy, you've got the demolitions expert, and then you've got like the new recruit or the younger recruit. So that's why I was thinking G.I. Joe. Also, it helps that I was just reading, after I read your guys' book, I read a Larry Hama G.I. Joe book, so they kind of cemented together.
Well, we all love Larry Hama, so
yeah, that's a good way to compare the books. I love it.
Yeah. So, tell us about the characters. I mean, you're using the 4, at least in the first story, you get these 4 main pigeons.
So, like I said before, everything for me is character driven, and the G.I. Joe comparison is not lost on me in any way. I know I don't want to spoil anything for season 2, but Ben might have hinted towards some kind of G.I. Joe things. There's an issue I commonly refer to as the G.I. Joe issue, because when you read it, you'll see there's a lot of nods to the G.I. Joe animated cartoon, the 80s G.I. Joe animated cartoon. So that's not lost on any of us. The characters, I guess. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So we talked about all the ways that these stories may have been influenced, if it is all in their heads, right? So there's televisions that they could have seen across, rooftops into somebody's houses. There could be newspapers lining the bottom of the cage. There could be comic books lining the bottom of the cage. So all of these things, pop culture in general, can really influence these adventures. And so Jay says, there's nods to things. Well, those nods came from stuff that they saw out there. Could be comics, newspapers, television, movies, anything they can see from their rooftop in New York City. Sorry, Jay.
And the way I put issues together, it's always fun because I'll write in the art direction, I guess is the best way to put it, include this image from this issue of this book. So that's specific there. And it's there as that nod. It's there for the observant reader. So you could pick up any issue. You can start reading issue 3. And I actually pick up on issue 4. And I will write standalone stories with that idea that, hey, if you pay attention to my standalone story too, you might catch references from issue 4 in issue 5. It's there. They exist. That's how we build continuity. But what I love doing when I write is putting those hidden gems, Easter eggs, so to speak, but not necessarily, every book I write has a carrier somewhere in there. And that's just my own Easter egg. Every carrier book I write has a direct nod to the issue itself. Like my first issue 4, called Watchers in the Night. There are clues. It's obvious which story was the inspiration to that particular book. And Jason Kimball nails the art in such a way that I can't wait for that issue to be released. Once that's released, like it changes so much. And I should answer the question, right? So the characters, that's where we were. So you talked about the grizzled vet. That's Fable. Mm-hmm. And Fable, the bazooka carrying old veteran, I guess. I don't want to say old veteran because I don't really think he's that old, but he's been through wars, and he's really the key that holds everything together. He's the one who's, I don't want to go too Ninja Turtles on it, because to compare him to Leonardo would be a mistake, because where Leonardo is that goofy, I'll do anything that my leader says to do, and I'm going to lead no matter what. Fable's more like the leader who's going to get down in the trenches and, front of the line, launching that bazooka and leading the charge. Fable's really hardened. And that brings the second in command, Gladius, who is a gladiator, and she will wear Roman armor. She will have her spear. She'll challenge Fable at times. She'll support Fable at times. She'll get in the way of arguments between carriers that, they might not agree with what's going on. And to a fault, will follow Fable's orders, at the end of the day. That brings up Dark Dove, who is the technology genius of the crew and a ninja. But it's pretty cool seeing a USB cable as a nunchuck. I'm just saying. So for Dark Dove, it's going to be the brains of the operation. How can I do A, B, or C using technology? And more the battle with the path, where Fable's like, there we go. Where Fable's jumping into the trenches, Dark Dove's like, wait, let's think this out. And then there's Cherry Bomb, who is your aviator specialist, who's going to sit up top, eyeball the situation, and drop bombs from above. Anything you want to add, Ben? I think I
think you nailed it. Fable is a variant, is an echo of another similarly named character out there in pop culture you may have heard of. Big shoulder pads, big guns, stars. So.
Rhymes with Fable.
I was a little slow on that, but I got it.
I didn't even have to say it out loud, sort
of. Were there inspirations for the other characters then?
Like I said, Erica Heflin, co-owner of this thing, she took my character Fable and came up with the others. And so we all designed them based on her initial character suggestions and creations. So I would defer to Erica J. Heflin, who is a tremendous writer in her own right. She's written 2 of these issues, actually. One we're releasing, one we're holding off on. She's written a bunch of stuff for Inverse and Greyhaven and Xenoscope. So Erica Heflin, nod to her. She's out there. I talk to her once in a while, and but she is the co-creator of this book, and I give her credit for the 3 other characters besides Fable.
All right. So what was for Ben, what was the creative process like for you and Erica? How did you go from, hey, I have this idea for Carrier Pigeons to the book we have now? How did that process work?
I knew her slightly from Facebook, and I put it out there, sort of a general question to my Facebook friends. Hey, I came up with this idea about carrier pigeons. And I have to say, I'm not the type like Jay who can sit and type out a story. I'm more of the showrunner on this, right? So I have a general idea, and I take it to somebody who is capable, is very good at writing stories, and that was Erica. And so we talked about it for a little bit. I told her the basic idea behind it, the characters that I had created, and she took it and ran. She wrote issue 1, which is coming out next week, by the way. It was supposed to come out this week, but it's coming out next week because of pandemic-related shipping issues, basically, is what it is. She wrote issue 1, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then she wrote a solo origin story about Fable, which possibly will come out in season 2. I actually drew that issue a few years ago, but I don't. I'm a decent artist on some things, but I don't want the worst looking book in the series to be mine, and so that one will probably be redrawn.
Ben's very hard on himself. He's totally wrong, but that's okay.
Too kind. Anyway, the point is, she wrote 2 stories and gave us, what we had to work with, and it was a great experience. And we talk from time to time. So.
All right, now, so Erica's worked on this, Jay's worked on this, you've working on it. Who else has been involved in the series?
So I'm in California, outside of San Francisco, and a friend of mine named Johnny Arnold owns a store called Comicopolis in Santa Cruz, California, about an hour and a half from me. And he wrote issue 2 and 3. Jay mentioned he came on issue 4. So Erica wrote issue 1. J.D. Arnold wrote issue 2 and 3. And then Jay came on with issue 4. Johnny loved this concept so much. He and I batted some ideas around for what a cartoon would look like. And he wrote a 28 episode animated pitch Bible. So I love the Carriers as a comic book. It's going to be a fantastic comic book. I have the 2 covers for issue 1 right here, in fact. Right? They showed up on my doorstep yesterday. But in the end, I want the Carriers to be a cartoon. So we have this animated pitch Bible written by J.D. Arnold. Actually, Jay recently went and added a bunch of episodes to it, added a bunch of characters that we've created over the last couple of years since Johnny had done the initial Bible. So, I want this thing to be a cartoon. I think it has the legs. I think it has what it takes to be something larger in our culture. I believe in it. So that's what we're doing. We're putting out a bunch of comics, and then we have it with a producer who may be interested. We'll see. It's too early, and I put the chances of that very low of it being a cartoon, but it's always a possibility.
But listen, if anybody out there from Netflix, Amazon, we're here.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah.
Just come on out. We'll talk.
It's all right from us.
I can absolutely see this working as a animated series. You get a lot of attention on that. Now that I've seen one of the covers, and I believe it's done by Cedric Nacone, right?
Correct. That's this
one. He's an old buddy of mine.
Oh, good.
Yeah. We used to shop at the same shop years ago. But who's the other cover by?
Let me stick with Cedric for a minute. I know Cedric from my time at Image Comics. I actually worked with Extreme Studios in the mid-'90s for a couple of years. Rob Liefeld, he took me on. I knew him socially at church, actually. He took me on to the Image office where I was for a few months, and then he took me into Extreme Studios. So I had a couple of years of Extreme Studios, and that's where I got to know Cedric. And so all these years later, he is one of the 2 covers on my issue 1 of the Carriers. The other cover, I should say, is by Jeff Johnson, one of my all-time favorite artists and just a great human being. He did the Wonder Man series in the 90s for Marvel, you probably recall. And I've followed his stuff ever since. And so I've sort of gotten to know him online, and I pitched him on this, and he did this fantastic cover. You can see obviously this is my favorite piece of artwork ever. So
yeah, I'm a SoCal guy, so I know that circle,
Right on.
Yeah. And I knew a lot of the folks over at Extreme, like Richard Horry and stuff like that. So
awesome, yeah, Richard and Tanya, great people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now you're moving over to Red 5. How did that come about?
I had started a Kickstarter for carriers, and I set my goal too high. So I've published, I don't know, I've been a part of about 75 comic books over my time. 3 of them were called Always Punch Nazis, left-wing politics, anti-racist anthology. Here's issue 3 of Always Punch Nazis. And we had done pretty good Kickstarters, pretty successful Kickstarters. And I thought I could translate this new thing, the carriers, because it was time to get it out there. I thought I could translate it to that audience, that anti-racist anthology. And I was wrong. I set it too high. So about halfway through the campaign, I pull the plug, and we start retooling, figuring out, a lower goal, do some things differently. And Joshua Starnes gets a hold of me from Red 5 and says, "Hey, I like that. Do you want to do something else with it? And, do you want it in comic book stores? Do you want it in bookstores?" That's exactly what I want, I told him. So yes, please. And so here we are. It's been 4 months or so. And it's been a grand time. They're really easy guys to work with, him and Scott Chitwood at Red 5. And, the Kickstarter problem was a bummer, but I tell you what, we've had the best orders, or tied for the best orders, post-pandemic for Carriers #1. So people like what they see when they, when they hear about it, and when they see it out there online, and the orders are good. And I think people are surprised at the amount that we got, for a property that no one's ever heard of. So.
All right. We're coming up to the halfway point in the episode, so we'll go ahead and take our break now. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about your guys' individual careers and, what you've done and what you might want to do next. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a minute.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey. And behind every page, there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking to Ben Ferrari and Jason Hewer of the comic Carriers #1, which will be out next Wednesday. Not this week due to shipping. We all know the mail's screwed up right now.
The mail, yeah.
I mean, other than Amazon Prime, they're about the only people that seem to actually show up stuff on. That's not an ad; it's just an observation. Okay. And I think that's because they have they own their own fleet at this point, but everything else is being delayed here and there. So look for Carriers next week at your local comic shops. And when you're in the stores this week, tell your retailers that you want it.
Absolutely.
So,
That'll be great.
Yeah. All right. Now let's start with Jason on this one. Jason, what have you done prior to Carriers? And yeah, I don't need to be the big. There you go. That's better. What have you done prior to Carriers? And yeah, it's all about you right now, Jason.
So by day, I'm a teacher. I teach kids how to read and write. That's my day job. And leading by example is something I've done my entire teaching career. So I actually started my published writing with Greyhaven Comics, which is actually how I got in touch with Erica Heflin. So she seems to be the common thread in this whole entire story. Great person, really took me under her wing. No pun, I swear. And really showed me the ropes and helped me get through. It was really awesome. Greyhaven, I kind of wish they were still around. They were a company where all they wanted to do was give people a chance to get published. And that's a big thing, because I would write. I've been writing since I was, a lot of people are like, oh, I was writing when I was 7, 8, 9. I started writing around 20 years old. And I never stopped. But when I started writing, it was always this idea that I'll just write stories. Nobody needs to read them. It's fine. And what I didn't realize was I was actually just working on my writing craft. And I just keep writing. And then, going to shows, making contacts, making connections. And I got in touch with Greyhaven Comics. It was actually James Howlett that started me off there and gave me my first story to write, which was just a 2-page ghost story. It was nothing large. But once I saw that in print, it was like I was addicted. Now I had to write to be published. Now it wasn't enough just to have my stories on my computer saved on a drive. So I was searching for everything I could do to get the next story published. It was what's next. So they published roughly 5 shorts for me. And then whatever happened, I guess it just didn't work out for the company, and they ended up, I want to say they shut their doors at this point. But through there, I got in touch with Erica and Ben and Carriers, and been doing a lot of work with Pilot Studios. Between Saturn and Orion was a creation that Ben and I put together about a young technological genius. There it is. Jeff Johnson art right there. So a young technological genius who's battling a master of the mystical arts. And this guy, Zodiac, all he wants to do is sacrifice innocent souls to honor ancient gods. So he is trying to save the world, because if he doesn't honor these gods, then he's going to end up, we know what happened with Noah's flood. So right there is like what he's preventing from happening. I was involved with the ground floor and the Kickstarters with Always Punch Nazis. That was wonderful. We did a crossover with all the Pilot Studio characters called Zion Wars, which really was a wonderful, it's a 48-page little graphic novel there where, Ben came to me, and this is usually how it goes. I end up putting my foot in my mouth. There it is. Corey Hampshire cover right there. Ben will come to me and just say, hey, can you do this? And I will say yes. And then I'll figure out how to do it. That's really how my writing world has gone. So he's like, I want to do a crossover where we unite the various Pilot Studios characters. Can you write something? So I'm like, yes. Can I read these characters? Because some of them I haven't read yet. And he's like, sure. And then we get Zion Wars. And that was a fun one. And from there, most recently, a friend of mine, Mark Compton, got in touch with me, and he had this character called Draculangela, who is a vampire angel. So, I call her a demon torn between darkness and light. And she's, trying to save the world from this technological abomination who has some sort of mysterious ties to her past. Currently, that's on Kickstarter right now. So that's a good one. Book 2 is on Kickstarter, where you can always catch up with book 1. So hopefully Mark and I can continue going through that path. And it's just one connection after another. And really, like I said, it starts with Greyhaven. It builds the Pilot Studios. It goes to Marcus Publishing. Now we're with Red 5. Ben mentioned the animated Bible pitch that we have going on. It's just what's next, and that's where we are. So it's exciting.
All right, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Kyle, you can do the swap of the picture thing. Yeah. Ben, now it sounds like Pilot Studios is kind of your thing, huh?
It is.
Tell us about Pilot Studios. I mean, we got a couple. You were holding up some covers.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Pilot Studios and what you got going on there.
Cool. So I started as Earthbound Comics in probably 2009. And about then I had finished 4 issues of a book called Long Hunters, North American mountain men, early 1800s frontier genre. That was my first books I'd ever drawn and written. I wrote it, created it. Started expanding the people I was working with, creating more things. I changed my name from Earthbound Comics to Pilot Studios in 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. And in that time, I like to say I've been a part of 75 or so or more books. Not all of those are Pilot Studios books. Some of those are Earthbound Comics. Some of those are books that other people put together and I just contributed art, or I helped them in editorial, or a zillion different ways. Mm-hmm. But with Pilot Studios, I'm primarily a showrunner, a producer. I edit all the books. I create most of it. I like to put things out there that I create, and it seems that a lot of people are happy to help me with that. Like Jay said, I like to come with him with a big idea, or Kurt Belcher. We haven't mentioned Kurt Belcher yet. Kurt and Jay and I are pretty much the main people making the decisions as Pilot Studios. What books are we going to do, in what order? So we create characters all together and we make them happen. We find artists. Jay or Kurt will typically write most of those books, and I'll make them happen, like an editor, a showrunner, producer, whatever you want to call it. And that's the same for the carriers as well. So Jay talked about Saturn and Orion. We finished book 1 a while ago. We have book 2 in production right now with a terrific artist named German Andriola, I believe is his last name. Apologies if I mispronounce that. We've done some books called Sun Chasers. Mm-hmm. It's about the son of Hitler out to redeem the Hitler name. So what I do is I come up with an idea like Sun Chasers. The son of Hitler is a good guy. And then, he's taking out people like his father, sort of the Punisher with a much better backstory. And I'll take that idea and maybe a character design. That's what happened with the Sun Chasers as well, to a friend of mine named Buck Weiss, and Buck expanded it and wrote some fantastic stories. So we did a graphic novel called Sun Chasers, Hitler's America, art by Kurt Belcher, again, one of my biggest collaborators besides Jay. And so we've done the graphic novel Hitler's America, Sun Chasers. I drew an issue 1 for the Sun Chasers. We did Always Punch Nazis, obviously 3 volumes. We created a character called Dive Bomb. He's sort of a washed-up superhero, not too bright, but his daughter and he both have jetpacks. And she's super smart. He's not very bright, and she's sort of the glue that keeps this family together. It's got a really good father-daughter dynamic. So we did an anthology book with that. A nice, I don't know, it must have been 60-page, full of short stories about Dive Bomb. So at this point, with the carriers going to Red 5, for the last 10 years, basically, I've been taking my Pilot Studios books to conventions and selling them at shows. I have some stuff on Amazon. I've done a bunch of coloring books that are on Amazon, as well as the Hitler's America, the Sun Chasers book. And so I've been promoting my Pilot Studios books, but like getting back to Red 5, this is a very time-consuming time. Getting the books through Red 5 and out the door takes a lot of my time. I draw as well. Let's see. I draw as well. I created something called Kanan the Marauder, sort of a Conan-style bunny. So I'm working on that right now, and that takes up my drawing time. But editorial-wise, it's 99% the carriers. So I'm an electrician by day, and I come home and I hang out with my family, and then I get a couple hours at night to work on comics. And so I'll draw. These days, it's Kanan the Marauder. It's a 4-issue series, and it may be Pilot Studios' book. It may be Red 5. It may be something else. I don't know. It's too early for that. But we have a couple more books for Pilot Studios in the works, at different stages. And we're working on those to get them finished. But the majority of my time these days is Red 5, putting the carriers out, because it's an important next step for me. And as Jason said, we've reached a level that we hadn't reached yet, and so that takes most of my time. I'd like to continue working with Red 5, put out at least a second season of the carriers, and then some other books. I've been able to pitch friends of mine who are working on books with Red 5, and it sounds like there's some good things happening there. So I'm able to sort of expand my friends, and our presence in Red 5 with quality projects, and I think Red 5 is happy with that so far. I guess that encapsulates what I'm doing right now. It's mainly the carriers and Red 5, finishing up some other Pilot Studios books, and then working on something new, the Conan Bunny.
I'm curious. There's it sounds like you and I have both been around the industry quite a bit of time, because I started off about in the mid 90s as well.
Okay.
There's been a lot of changes, starting off in the mid 90s with the change of how distribution worked and the boom, the bust, everything that's going on. From a publisher standpoint, from doing your own studio, from dealing with putting comics together, how have you seen the change? And to go from where you'd struggle to basically get into the Diamond catalog in the 90s, if you were a small publisher, and just to get any kind of footprint, to now being in a point where you could do a Kickstarter and reach an audience differently. Just what do you think of the journey that's been happening over the last 25 years?
That's a huge topic, and I've submitted Pilot Studios books a couple times. A couple times you get replies, a couple times you don't, and at some point you just say, I'm going to do it on my own. So we've done 5 or 6 Kickstarters. We've raised some money. We've gained some fans. We've finished comic books. We've got some stuff on Amazon. So, like you said, everything's just been changing so much, and you try and stay ahead of it. My ultimate lifelong goal has been to be in previews, to be in Diamond. And so while I've been happy and fortunate to finish a bunch of Kickstarters and get some books out there, this Red 5 thing is a culmination of my lifelong dream. 35 years I've been collecting and drawing comics since I was 10 years old. But again, like you said, it all changes so quickly. It's been difficult the last couple of years to get into Diamond. But I have a feeling it's gotten easier lately with DC doing its Lunar thing, right? They have Lunar and another distributor. Yeah. And Marvel being now through Penguin and Diamond in some sort of weird way. I think Diamond is open to smaller publishers, which is just absolutely wonderful for a lot of me and my friends. I see a guy named Tony Cottrell, Advent. These guys are putting out quality books, and they're in Diamond regularly. And I'm extremely happy for them. And I think that's just sort of where we are. There's so many options, and Marvel and DC making their moves, that Diamond's opening its doors a little bit more to smaller press publishers, which is just, it's wonderful. It's excellent, The digital realm, of course, a lot of people are into that. Carriers will be out day and date on digital release. It's changed a ton, and it'll change tomorrow, and it'll be different, and we'll figure it out as we go.
Okay. Now, Jason, it sounds like, or do you prefer Jay or Jason?
Either or. I go, I'm published under Jay Hewer. My website's jasonhewer.com. So either or.
Okay.
I have no preference.
Where do you see yourself going at this point? I mean, you're into the writing, but you've got the teaching day job. You're writing at night. Where do you want to get to? I mean, Ben seems to like the show running thing, the pushing, the publishing. What about you? I mean, is there an end goal? Do you want to end up writing for Marvel and DC? Do you want to stick with your own stuff where you can get more creative control?
So anyone who knows me well knows, like, I am super laid back, and this idea that I just don't rush. So for me, teaching's my day job. There's nothing in my foreseeable future that says, hey, I'm going to leave teaching. So if Marvel came knocking on my door, that would be amazing. And I probably would say, sure, let me do that and keep the stacks where I can handle them. But at some point I have to stop teaching. So now the question is, did I build enough of a resume at that point to continue writing? It's weird, but it's like, do I even want to go there? When the option's on the table, that's a whole different story. I'm always pitching. So when I come up with ideas, I'm pitching companies and seeing who's interested. But Ben said it best. We're in a world now where it's like, do I depend on Marvel to make comics with, or do I just make my own comics? One of my good friends, should I name drop? Yes. Drop, not name. Okay, I'll name drop. So I talk with Justin Gray very frequently. And he's currently running a Kickstarter, Stand Still, right now. Just launched earlier today. I'm sorry if I'm making everybody. I'm going to promote what I can for whoever. Justin worked with Jimmy Palmiotti at DC Comics. What was that? Sorry.
We're all about promotion here. Plug anything you want.
No, Justin Gray is such a good guy that if a couple of people want like really good indie comics, Stand Still 7 and 8 or 6 and 7, whatever he's running right now. I don't even look at it. I just back it at this point because it's that good. But he worked with Jimmy Palmiotti, and in talking with him, him and Jimmy were working on Jonah Hex and other DC books. And, he'll look at me and be like, look what I'm doing now. I'm now doing independent books for myself. It's an avenue. Is your goal to make $1 million on a comic book, or is your goal just to have comics published? From the get-go, for me, it was just to have comics published. So where Ben says his goal, he had the goal. I want to be in Diamonds. I want to be in previews. He's hit that goal. Now it's what's the next option? For me, it was I need to get a book published. All right, cool. Or no, actually it started with I need to write, and then I got published, and then I'm an addict. Now I need to get more books published. So for me, it's just, hey, I'm going to continue to have books published. I started out with most recently artist hunting for a book that I'm not going to mention too much about it because it's in the early developmental stages, but I'm like, I'm going to self-publish this, and then I'll shop it around the same like we're doing with Red 5 with Carriers and other books. So for me, it's resume building because I know I don't want to say I know my limits because I honestly don't know my limits. I mentioned Mark Compton before. He could call me up later and be like, hey, I want to write this book. Let's do this. Here's the idea. And next thing I know, tomorrow I'm writing a 22-page comic. Because that's kind of my way of life. It's like, hey, what's next? Oh, I have nothing on the table. I'll just binge read and really work on, breaking down there. Oh, I have this spark of an idea. Let me develop that. Right now I'm typing up my spark of an idea involved dinosaurs because my son loves dinosaurs. So I'm like, oh, let me see if I could do something with this. And then dinosaurs. I want to put a book out for my 9-year-old. So I just sit at the computer and start typing the most gibberish of things. And eventually it becomes a story. And then it's like, all right, now what do I do? Do I make it a pitch and go to, you mentioned Aftershock. I love Aftershock. So if I can get a book published with Aftershock, there's some great people there. They have a great thing. I wouldn't say no. But I'm very passive with the way I go about developing books. Like some people come along, and Ben and I have experienced this. They're like, we need this book done now. I'm like, whoa, don't rush it. We have time, plenty of time. No, it needs to be done now. It needs to be. I'm like, and that's me. I'm just like, just relax, because the one thing I can tell you is for me, especially for me, how do you write stories? Well, I write a little bit every day, and eventually you have a book. And it's done. And then it goes to the artist. Well, the artist, I'll use Ben as an example. Ben has a day job. Ben's drawing Kanan the Marauder right now, and I've seen the art. I've seen the script. I've seen where it's going. It's phenomenal. But I also know Ben's pace. All right. Ben's going to draw a page, 2 pages, 3 pages a week on a good week. And then on a great week, he might get that 4th page done or inked. I didn't go to inking, did I? But they will get done, because the one thing that we have accomplished is getting books done. So for me, it's a matter of building my books 1 book at a time, 2 books at a time. I mean, Ben mentioned we have like 5 books percolating, just being built in various stages. And it's just what's next. What book is ready to go? You know, Carriers came to town. Season 1 is doing spectacular numbers from what I understand. I don't want to push anyone for season 2, but I mean, if you want to see season 2, start ordering season 1, because you won't be disappointed, especially with, I know where season 2 is going, guys. I know how season 1 ends. You want to go for season 2. We might. Yeah. And again, I'll go back to Erica Heflin. The piece of advice she gave me, and Ben kind of supported this earlier, each one of these books is an open closed story, because you never know, especially when you're doing independent books, you never know when book 2 is going to come out. So you can do like Saturn and Orion book 1. I couldn't even 3 years ago at this point that came out, and book 2 is in the works now. If you happen to read Saturn and Orion 1, you're going to love it, and it ends. But the way I write is I'll leave the door open. Like, hey, I was honored to write issues 4 and 5 for Carriers. They're both open closed stories, but the end of Carriers 5 will absolutely 100% lead into season 1 in the subtlest. I'm sorry, season 2 in the subtlest of ways. But I've seen the art for that. I can't wait. So I hope that answered your question. I kind of went off on a tangent there.
Can I add to what Jay said?
Sure.
He often, as he said, people will say, "Hey, I need this story. Can you do this?" And he'll do it, and it usually, he says he takes his time. From my perspective, he's like that. It shows up a week later, and that's stunning. So if I can make some news right now, I'm going to tell you something that I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway.
Oh,
Kyle,
good.
would you put that piece of artwork up? It's a piece of Carrier's artwork.
Ooh.
It's a little digitized, unfortunately, but that right there, I wish I had well, anyway. That is the cover for Red 5's free comic book day issue. And I've been told we were supposed to wait for Diamond to announce it, but here we are, and I'm going to do it anyway. That is Red 5's free comic book day issue. We have an 8-page story. There are 2 other stories as well. One by a friend of mine named Alex DeLuca, and The Dragon Whisperer is his story. And then a third story that looks excellent as well. So the Carriers has the lead story in Free Comic Book Day from Red 5 Comics, and we got the cover as well. So at the bottom of that art, there'll be 2 circles featuring the other 2 properties that they decided to promote. But Jay and I are extremely proud of this piece of art being the cover for Red 5's Free Comic Book Day. So May 5th, you're going to see this in stores, and it's going to be seen by thousands and thousands of people. And is there any better way to promote something new and exciting than giving it away to thousands of people? I don't know what that is.
No, that's excellent.
And
who's the cover
I'm
artist
sorry. Oh, there it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. Who's the cover artist on that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Elias Martens. Elias did. He did actually a lot of the art in issue 1 that's coming out next week, and then he's working on a full issue for season 2, and then he's doing the art in this 8-page free comic book day story. So
awesome. That is great. Congratulations on that. I look forward to that. I look forward to Carriers #1 coming out next week. I should probably mention that we had some folks popping up and saying hey to you guys in the chat. Flush Jackson, Jen King, Adrian Montez, and of course one of our regulars, JD Smith.
Hi guys.
Just real quick, since this is part of the industry, of course, is hitting the convention circuit. So are you guys going to be out in the con soon? And if so, where can folks find you?
Jay?
Oh, me. So I'm a Long Island native. So a lot of the conventions I tour are Long Island. One of my favorites is CradleCon at the Cradle of Aviation. If you're on Long Island and you know the area, you probably heard of CradleCon. There's another one coming up in the summer in August called TropicCon that I should be at. I just put in for the stuff today. I haven't tabled at New York Comic Con, but I'm always there. I'm always floating around. This being the first year back, it was kind of like, do I want to go? Do I not want to go? This was a very weird year for conventions, to say the least. So I tend to go to the smaller conventions and just, connect with fans. It's like, here's a catalog of books. People love independent comics, just the indie books. So right now, those are the two that I know of coming up in right now. But I always say, follow on social media, check out my website. I always post an update, where I'm going to be. And that's that.
And Ben, what about you in Pilot Studios? Where can folks find you?
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't do the nationwide tour that so many of my friends do. Other small press people get on a plane with their boxes and they go hit multiple places, or they drive, across the country. I'm an electrician by day, so I have a day job. I get the weekends. So I stick to the Bay Area. I'm about an hour outside of San Francisco. So every year I hit pretty much the same shows. If there's a new one, I'll jump on it. Like there was a new San Jose con maybe 2 months ago. That was absolutely awesome, put on by Stephen Wyatt. And
okay. I've been to his older shows that he used to do.
Yeah, he's still doing them.
That's great.
This was one of my favorite ones because it was all comics. This is not a slight on toy collectors or cosplayers, but when I grew up, it was all comics, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy long box after long box after long box after long box of old comics, and that's what this was. So I'm going to be going to the San Jose Con again when it comes back around. I'll always hit the East Bay Con, which is another Steve show, and then the Stockton Con and Grape City Con. Grape City's in Lodi, or Lodi Con is Grape City Con, and that one was spectacular this year. So Bay Area shows primarily for me. Will that change with some more exposure from the carriers? Possibly, but right now and for the foreseeable future, and it'll be local San Francisco Bay Area shows.
All right. Well, guys, really appreciate you guys joining me. I wish you the best of luck with carriers and for all the other stuff you guys got in the works. Folks, stick around. Black Comic Universe is up immediately after the show, and Kyle and I will be back tonight for In Stores this week. So join us then. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.
See you guys.